Give it up, Richard. You don't have any time. Chicago Police Department thinks you're a cop killer. They will shoot you on sight.
Guilt and innocence do not exist outside the law.
If that is what you believe, kill me now.
Did you kill Helen Kimble? Why did you lie? Did you kill Helen Kimble?
Hi, welcome to Cinema Rolls, your go-to channel for movie comparisons. I'm your host, Basha, and today we're going to wrap up our spotlight on everyone's favorite manhunters, Inspector Javert from Les Miserables and Lieutenant Gerard from The Fugitive. In parts 1 and 2, we got to know these characters and explored what fueled their obsession, and we compared and contrasted their strategies and what happened when the tables were turned. If you missed those, you can find the links below. Now, let's dive in and get right to the final confrontation. In Les Miserables, if you remember from part 2, the fugitive Jean Valjean had an opportunity to put an end to Javert and free himself once and for all when Javert was caught infiltrating a group of revolutionaries that Valjean had gotten mixed up with.
I'm a troublesome spy. You needn't be concerned. They will blow out my brains very shortly. And you, I suppose, will be certain to watch. You are welcome to.
But instead, Valjean sets him free. Very soon after that, they meet up again in the cavernous subterranean sewer system.
Halt!
Why did you let me go?
Did you see all the raw emotion bubbling under the surface when he asked that? What do you suppose that was all about? Earlier, when Jean Valjean had set him free, Javert said he'd rather be killed. And I said in the last video that I thought it was because he felt humiliated at being at the mercy of someone he considered to be his inferior. And I think that was part of it. But now, looking at his face and seeing that infinite sadness, I think on some level, he's questioning himself. He realizes that Valjean is a much better man than he thought. Maybe a better man than Javert himself. Remember, he didn't seem to be able to comprehend Valjean's acts of kindness to others in the past, and now that, after having pursued Valjean for decades, he's on the receiving end of that kindness and mercy, his entire worldview has just been shattered. And he's certainly not prepared for Valjean's answer to his question.
Once, many years ago, a remarkable man bought my soul. He removed from it all evil thoughts and gave it to God.
There is no God. There is only the law. Guilt and innocence do not exist outside the law.
You can just see the inner conflict playing all over his face. He's trying to convince himself of the truth of his own words, but he doesn't believe himself. He's made the law into his God, and his God has let him down. For the first time, he's seeing Valjean as a human being who doesn't quite fit into the criminal class as neatly as he'd always believed. And he's in the unenviable position of being duty-bound to return this very human and benevolent man to prison.
If that is what you believe, then you must kill me. Kill me now.
Turn around.
You can see he doesn't want to do it. We'll revisit this story at the end, but for now, let's move on to The Fugitive. Both TV Gerard and Tommy Lee Gerard use the one-armed man, Janssen, in their attempt to capture Richard Kimble. TV Gerard uses him as bait. Janssen's been arrested for another crime, and Gerard makes sure the story is published in the papers, emphasizing that the criminal was a one-armed man.
You think this will get him back? It could. If he sees the story, he'll take the chance. I know Kimble.
And he uses the news media to make an open appeal to Kimble.
But if Kimble gives himself up, we will make every effort to ascertain the truth.
To me, this sort of begs the question, why didn't he make every effort to ascertain the truth before? Anyway, Tommy Lee Gerard uses the one-armed man in a slightly different way, to gather clues as to Kimble's whereabouts. And he gets a lucky break when Kimble leads him to the one-armed man at the risk of giving Gerard a clue as to his own whereabouts.
Well, I am trying to solve a puzzle.
5 seconds location.
And I just found a big piece.
Richard, he didn't hang up the phone. Where's he at?
But once he meets the one-armed man, he knows there's something fishy going on.
Cosmo, this guy's dirty.
Yes, Sam, yeah, he is. You want us to put our people on him?
And that's the turning point. That's when his role begins to shift from manhunter to detective. And in the process, he uncovers an entire plot to silence Richard Kimble.
See this picture with all the fingerprints on it? I want you to find out who the guy is sitting next to Sykes. Find out his name, his age, his weight, his social security number, his location, relatives, pets. Dr. Nichols, sorry, I want to ask you one more question about the photograph. See this guy here in the purple shirt standing on the right side of the fish? You ever see him before? Devin McGregor did $7.5 billion net sales last year alone. Henry, Dr. Nichols lied to me. Go find him.
At this point, he's now more of an ally to Kimble than a nemesis.
Richard, I know you're innocent!
Do we see the same evolution with TV Gerard? We have seen over the course of the series that he does begin to harbor doubts about Kimble's guilt, and it soon becomes apparent that the one-armed man represents more than just Kimble bait for him. He wants to believe Kimble's story.
Did you kill Helen Kimble?
I want to see a lawyer.
Why did you lie? Did you kill Helen Kimble?
He knows in his heart that Kimble is innocent, but he still needs proof. But Janssen is released on bail before Kimble can take the bait.
You'll see to it that he doesn't leave the jurisdiction.
I assure you, my client has no desire to make a $3,000 contribution to the state of California. Good day, gentlemen.
So Kimble sets out to track him down, and Gerard goes after Kimble.
All right, hold it, Kimble. I'm sorry, your fare already left. Hands behind you.
And it's not until Gerard has him in custody that he really turns into an ally and gives Kimble 24 hours to prove his innocence. And when Kimble picks up some clues, Gerard is working right along with him trying to help him solve the case.
If it is the one-armed man, he could be waiting there right now.
But when they finally unearth an eyewitness who's unwilling to testify, because to do so would unmask his own cowardice, Gerard still feels that his hands are tied.
That was quite a story Mrs. Chandler told us. Unless her husband's prepared to tell it himself in court, I'm afraid it won't help you much.
Still, in a final confrontation between Kimble and the one-armed man, it's Gerard who shoots Janssen.
Yeah, I killed her. Now I'm going to kill you. Won't have to worry about you again no more.
And on top of that, he convinces the eyewitness to testify in court on Kimble's behalf.
Lieutenant, I saw that man, Johnson, murder Helen Kimble.
Are you willing to testify to that effect?
Yes.
The events leading up to this change of heart are different for the two Gerards. With TV Gerard, it's more or less a hunch based on everything that he's come to know about Kimble as a human being through his personal interactions with him over 4 years. Of course, his stubborn adherence to the letter of the law was a necessary plot device to keep the TV series going for 4 years, but it also made his character a stronger parallel to Javert's character in Les Mis. But Tommy Lee Gerard has had very little contact with Kimble, and his search has taken place over a period of days instead of years. But for all his protesting that he's not out to solve a puzzle, when the pieces are laid out in front of him, the natural-born detective in him can't help but put them together. And like Javert, both Gerards have to deal with the fact that they've been wrong in one way or another about the man they've been relentlessly hunting. So, now we come to the point where we ask, how do they handle it when they're proven wrong, when they come face to face with their false gods? Or, as the narrator in The Fugitive put it,
how long can a man search before the search destroys him?
In the case of Tommy Lee Gerard, he deals with it quite easily by changing the target of his hunt to the real bad guys and helping Richard Kimble clear his name.
Richard, I know you're innocent. I know about Frederick Sykes. I know about Dr. Charles Nichols. Richard, he borrowed your car the night of your wife's murder. He had the keys. He telephoned Sykes from your car, Richard.
But he still insists on going through the proper channels, partly for Kimble's protection and maybe partly for his own.
Give it up, Richard. You don't have any time. Chicago Police Department thinks you're a cop killer. They will shoot you on sight.
And although it takes TV Gerard a lot longer to get on board, once he's there, he's not just working on Kimble's behalf like Tommy Lee, he's working shoulder to shoulder with Kimble, helping him try to build a case on the scanty evidence they have to go on.
Anyone she talked to, a girlfriend, relative, anybody?
Nobody that would have just stood by and let me die.
You'll be amazed how many good people might do just that.
I almost get the impression that Gerard might be referring to himself right there. The way he'd always been so determined to bring Kimble back to death row in spite of his own slowly growing doubts about Kimble's guilt. And yet, when the 24 hours that he'd granted Kimble to clear his name ran out without them having uncovered any definitive evidence, even though it's clearly painful for him, he falls back to just doing his duty.
It's time. We better be starting. I promise I'll try and trace those phone numbers tomorrow. If we come up with that thing, I'll follow them through.
But in the end, when their combined efforts finally lead to clearing Kimble's name, no one could be happier for Kimble than Gerard. Wow. I think that may just be the most heartfelt handshake in the history of television. Little tear. And Tommy Lee Gerard brings a level of emotion that's more fitting for the shorter time frame that the two men have been involved. But he doesn't seem at all upset that he was wrong.
I know it, Richard. But it's over now.
You know I'm glad.
I need the rest.
Thought you didn't care.
I don't. Don't tell anybody, okay?
And in the end, he's willing and able to let go and move on to the next adventure. But I think TV Gerard has probably reached a point of no return. I don't think he'll have a breakdown of any kind, but his experiences over the past 4 years have changed him profoundly. And as dedicated as he is, I wouldn't be surprised to see a career change or maybe early retirement. Look at me, I'm talking about him as if he's not a fictional character. And that brings us finally to Inspector Javert. If you remember when we left off, Jean Valjean had given him the chance to kill him or arrest him, but he didn't take it. Let's see where he went. We've never seen him so close to tears before, and I actually feel for him. Anthony Perkins is such an incredible actor. But why did he jump? That is a question that has been debated far and wide. And I'm sure you have your own ideas about that, so please let me know in the comments. But here's my take on it. First of all, let's take a look at the position of his body as he throws himself into the sea. For me, this is the clue to everything. That's a very unusual way to jump into the sea with such a rigid body, a body as rigid as the rules he lived by. One of those rigid rules was his belief that there are only two classes of people in the world, those who break the law and those who uphold it. And in his worldview, these categories were immutable. As he said in the book, once a thief, always a thief. People's actions early on in life defined which category they belonged in, and they stayed there for life. The concept of redemption didn't even seem to be on his radar. I was almost going to say that he seems to think that people are born into these categories. But then how do you account for the fact that Javert himself was born in prison to parents who were criminals? Could it be that the way he lived his life was actually a search for redemption through right action as defined by the law? If so, imagine how he must have felt when his life of rigid adherence to the law brought him none of the relief that he sought, and yet this man, Jean Valjean, whom he regarded as a common criminal, had so clearly transformed his own life into one of virtual sainthood and was now bestowing mercy on him. Yet another humiliation at the hands of Jean Valjean, but one that cut him to the core. Because at the end of the day, Javert had been born into the criminal class, and try as he might to redeem the sins of his fathers, he never really believes deep down that he's worthy of redemption. But he can't acknowledge this to himself or his entire life will be a lie. So he needs Valjean to be wrong because that's the only way that Javert can be right. And he so desperately needs to be right. We have a foreshadowing of the impact that Jean Valjean will have on Javert the very first time they meet in the prison, and Valjean dares to raise his eyes and meet the gaze of his captor. In Javert's worldview, those who are subjected to authority do not look into the eye of authority. Likewise, Valjean's rescue of two other prisoners, the one who'd been crushed under a rock at the quarry and the one who almost fell into the sea, doesn't jive with Javert's concept of the criminal mindset. So right off the bat, Javert knows that this man is not like other men, and it unsettles him. And that, I believe, is one of the main reasons for his dogged pursuit of Jean Valjean. He sees in Valjean an innate dignity that he himself does not possess, and he needs to snuff it out. Because as long as Valjean is free, there's a voice whispering in Javert's ear that he, Javert, is not the man he so desperately needs to believe himself to be. Another rigid rule that Javert lived by was that the law decrees what is right and what is wrong, and who is right or wrong. And once again, Jean Valjean doesn't fit neatly into either of these categories. In Javert's mind, a man who has broken the law is a criminal, regardless of how minor the transgression. And no amount of good deeds can cancel out the sins of his past. So in his dogged determination to bring Valjean to justice, as defined by the law, he's able to disregard all of Valjean's good deeds. But once Valjean's kindness becomes personal, he can't disregard it anymore. And now we really begin to see the inner turmoil as Javert starts to become aware of a sense of right and wrong that's not prescribed by the law. For the first time in his life, he sees a conflict between legality and morality. He's in a catch-22 situation where he can either act legally or morally, but he can't do both because the two are diametrically opposed in this situation. Javert had long since surrendered his own moral compass to his God, the law. The law had always defined right and wrong for him, and he had lived his life accordingly. But now, it's not clear what's right or wrong, and he begins to question whether he has dedicated his life to the wrong God. In the end, he chooses the moral course of action rather than the legal course. But that means he's failed in his duty to the law, and he has to be punished for that. And that punishment is death, because he can't live with this failure, and he doesn't know how to embrace another way of being. Now look again at the military rigidity of his body. That, to me, looks more like a self-execution than a suicide. And imagine that the last thing he sees is a reflection of himself in the water, in that stiff posture representing both the rigid nature of his life and his unfulfilled desire to redeem himself by walking the straight and narrow. And I think it's one of the great tragedies of literature that Javert was not able to allow himself to be redeemed by Jean Valjean's mercy as Jean Valjean was redeemed by the bishop's mercy so long ago. Well, I'm sure I've only scratched the surface of this enduring character, and if you have any thoughts you'd like to share, please drop them into the comments. Next in this series, we compare Charles Dickens' classic A Tale of Two Cities with, dun-dun-dun, Casablanca. So, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification button so you can be sure to catch it. And if you've enjoyed this deep dive into Javert's character, here are some other videos I think you might enjoy. See you next time. Until then, try some more cinema rolls. They're good for you.